Hey guys, what's up? It's Charlie here, and today we're going to be looking at 10 hilarious ripoffs of the most popular cartoons. We all love watching cartoons. However, it may surprise you to hear that your favorite cartoon looks totally different in another country. These are some ripoffs of the most popular cartoons in other countries that will make you cry with laughter. But before we get into it, be sure to subscribe and why not press the notification bell too. Coming in at number 10, we have The Simpsons. We all know The Simpsons. They've been going for over 40 years and are America's favorite animated family. Sorry, Griffins. It's a staple of American culture and everybody knows about their yellow skin and roles within the family. But in Georgia, they have their own rip-off copy of The Simpsons. And that's Georgia, the country near Russia, not the state in America. The show is called The Samsonades, which is very obviously a rip-off. However, just from looking at it, it's clear they're ripping off The Simpsons. There's a dopey guy called Gila instead of Homer. There's also a smart girl who's very much like Lisa, and of course a wild child who is like Bart. The mum, who is the doting housewife, is also similar to Marge. A Maggie equivalent doesn't feature in the show, but what does is a green parrot. It looks like Snowball and Santa's Little Helper weren't copied into this show. This is actually the second most popular show in Georgia, and it's also long running too, as it's been going on since 2009. One thing's for sure, the animation isn't exactly as good as the real thing. Next up is Adventure Time. One country known for knockoff products is China. There's a lot of Chinese animation studios which are very cheap but not very good in quality. One of the knockoff cartoons made over in China is a ripoff of Adventure Time. Adventure Time is one of the most popular cartoons right now, but if you head over to China you'll find a cartoon named The Legend of Lucky Pie. The animation style is very similar to the original, but as I said, not as good. And not only that, the characters are pretty much identical except for having different names. There have only been 6 episodes so far, but that's because it's surprisingly just made by 2 people. However, you can find this on Chinese television, which is surprising. You may think that the Adventure Time creators would be pretty annoyed about this ripoff, but Steve Wolfhard, a storyboard artist for Adventure Time, says he likes the show. The show is basically the same storyline as Adventure Time, except for references and jokes have been adapted for a Chinese audience. It is impressive that this is made by just 2 people, however it is a knockoff after all. Next up is Pokemon. Pokemon is a wildly popular Japanese cartoon that has been syndicated to many countries in many languages. This includes Portuguese, but despite this, in Brazil there's a knockoff version of this cartoon called Dogmons. It's about a group of people who wander around collecting little dog-like animals. Instead of the main character being called Ash, they're called Alex. And instead of Pikachu, their companion is a dog called Green Dog. It's been going on since 2002 and is very low budget. The starter Pokemon, or Dogmons, are also very similar. Charizard has been named to Pollen-Dog in the show, and Squirtle has been renamed to Sea-Dog. So, the characters and Pokemon are very similar, but so are the elements. The elements include fire, water, air, and earth. But if you want to see this show, act fast, as this show will apparently be cancelled soon. I can see why, seeing as they already have Pokemon in Brazil, so there's really no need for this show. But it is still a funny knockoff to check out if you want. Next up is Kung Fu Panda. Kung Fu Panda is all about a fat panda who becomes a martial arts master. It's one of DreamWorks' most successful animated movies of all time, grossing over $631 million. And of course, the sequel grossed over $665 million. But there's a ripoff of it called Little Panda Fighter. This is by the same Brazilian animation company that made the Pokemon ripoff Dogmons. The Kung Fu Panda ripoff is all about a panda who works in a boxing club. However, he really wants to learn ballet. Now that is different from Kung Fu Panda, but not in a good way. The animation is very bad and the name is pretty stupid too. The name is Little Panda Fighter, which doesn't make any sense seeing as he likes ballet, not boxing. Surprisingly, this was also made in English, with the original Brazilian voices dubbed over by Americans. However, unsurprisingly, not many people watched this, neither did they watch the Brazilian original version. And seeing as this scored 17% on Rotten Tomatoes, it seems like the few people who did watch it didn't like it. Next up is ScoobyDoo. Now it's time for a classic, or a ripoff of a classic at least. ScoobyDoo is an original Hanna-Barbera cartoon which is a cultural icon. We all know and love the characters Shaggy, Scooby and the rest of the gang, but in Australia of all places they have their own ripoff. This is odd seeing as Australia is an English-speaking country that already has the original version of Scooby-Doo. But despite this, they have their own knockoff of the show called Goober and the Ghost Chasers. It's about a group of people and a dog named Goober finding and unmasking ghosts and criminals. That's right, they even used the classic Scooby-Doo unmasking gag. The show is very old and was released in 1973. However, the real Scooby-Doo was released in 1969, so this really goes to show people have been ripping off cartoons for decades. Would you ever want to watch Goober and the Ghost Chasers, or is this just too much of a shoddy knockoff? Next up is The Lion King. Who doesn't love The Lion King? It's one of the most emotional and loved Disney movies of all time, and it's the 8th highest grossing animated movie of all time, grossing nearly $1 billion. You should know by now that if there's money in something, people are going to try and recreate it to get a piece of the pie. Shortly after the Disney movie came out, a similar animated movie appeared on screens in Japan. It was called Jungle Emperor Leo, and it was a very clear ripoff of The Lion King. It's all about lions in the forest and has so many similarities to the real thing. It was heavily criticized in the American and Japanese press for being so similar to the real Lion King after it was released. If that wasn't bad enough, the character's even called Kimba like Simba, and it also came out surprisingly soon after Disney's The Lion King. However, despite most animated movie ripoffs not being good or well received, this movie actually has 4 stars on IMDb, which really isn't bad. Seeing as the actual Lion King movie has 4.5 stars, perhaps this knockoff is actually worth a watch. Next up is Cars. Now for another ripoff coming from Brazil. We all know the super popular Pixar movie Cars, featuring Lightning McQueen and his friends trying to win races. However, like with Pokemon and Kung Fu Panda, there's a ripoff version of it made in Brazil. The cars in the fake version look very similar to the Pixar version. They're not only drawn in the same style, but the characters are the same. They both have a tow truck and a VW camper van, along with many other ripped off characters. The movie is called The Little Cars in the Great Race, and only has 1.8 out of 10 stars on IMDb. It's sold on Amazon, but for legal reasons, they had to write not Disney Pixar in their title, but it's very clear that this is a copy of the Pixar movie. According to the Amazon reviews, kids seem to like watching it, but parents are not impressed. But then again, a 5-year-old standards aren't usually that high. But it must have made some sales because, believe it or not, there's a sequel to this movie called Little Cars 2 in Ridopolis Adventures. Next up is Ratatouille. This movie is another Pixar classic. It's all about a baffled aspiring chef in Paris and a rat who helps him cook. But in Brazil, they have something called Ratatouille. The movie's a clear knockoff of Ratatouille, which actually makes sense seeing as the title's a play on words. Ratatouille is very crudely animated, unlike the Pixar movie. However, much like the original, the ripoff copies the concept of a rodent cooking. However, the story is less complex and interesting here. All of the characters are mice. The chef, the diners, and even the villains are all mice. This makes me wonder if they hope people will simply buy this movie while confusing it for the real thing. The premise of this movie is that some evil mice are trying to steal the secret ingredients of the Ratatouille restaurant. So yeah, this movie doesn't seem great, and its reviews seem to confirm this. Next up is Brave. This Disney movie came out kind of recently in 2012, so you may not know about it. But if you ask any little girl what Brave is, you'll be sure they know. The movie is all about Princess Merida trying to undo a curse. It's actually pretty scary for a child's princess movie. But in India, they have something scarily similar. There's an Indian knockoff of Brave called Super K. It was originally titled Kiera the Brave, but Disney made them change it to Super K. The plot is pretty similar of a female princess who defies the odds and discovers the true meaning of courage. However, it's not as well animated and is in Hindi instead of English. It only has 1 out of 5 stars on IMDb, which isn't a good sign. And one IMDb user even claims it gave their 10-year-old nightmares. Man up, kid. But seriously, this movie seems very bad and copied from Brave. It's only 90 minutes long, which kind of looks like they rushed to get it out. But the fact that Disney actually forced them to change the name really shows how much of a copy this is. Coming up next is The Jungle Book. Now this is a true classic. Whether you're old or young, you gotta love Disney's The Jungle Book. It came out back in 1967, however this was during the Cold War. As a result of this, the USA and USSR were going head to head competing in everything from space technology to kids movies. So in response to the wildly successful Jungle Book movie, the USSR released a movie called Mowgli. It's an exact ripoff of The Jungle Book and features very similar characters such as a boy in the jungle and talking animals. And worst of all, they even stole Disney's classic animation style. However, despite this being a ripoff, it was very popular in the USSR and is now rated one of the world's most watched movies of all time. Although as good as it is, this may just be because it was stolen from something good, that being The Jungle Book. Next up is SpongeBob. We all love SpongeBob SquarePants. He's the most popular and only TV sponge. However, in China, there's a rip-off version of SpongeBob. It features a sponge under the sea, but it's marketed to a Chinese audience instead of an American one. The things that are different are the food, appearances of characters, and SpongeBob's job. That's right, he no longer works at the Krusty Krab here. Believe it or not, SpongeBob is banned by the government in China. However, this version is allowed to be shown there, as it's regulated by the government. You might assume it wouldn't be good, but it's actually seen as very funny in China. Check out the poll in the top right corner to vote for your favorite cartoon on this list. And guys, be sure to subscribe to my second channel, The Crafty. There's amazing life hacks, crafts, and DIYs on there, so definitely head over there and check it out. There'll be a video of The Crafty coming up on screen in a second, so be sure to click it, and why not subscribe as well. But as always, thanks for watching. Check out some more videos on screen right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.